Husbands and wives that got divorced after 20 years of marriage. What made you decide to change your mind after all that time? A friend of mine was married for nearly 30 years, 2 kids. As she put it, they'd been playing divorce chicken for a decade. There weren't any concrete reasons to get divorced. They didn't fight, they actually got along very well. They just weren't in love anymore. There was always a good pragmatic reason for them to stick together. They co-parented effectively. They actually liked each other. They kept saying their marriage was probably better than a lot of people's. A few years ago they just decided it was time. They went out for drinks and started hashing out how to divide their assets. They agreed on a 50-50 split. They got a lawyer to make everything legit, and a few months later they got divorced. My friend's ex-husband rented a house a few blocks away so the kids could easily walk between Mom's and Dad's house. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my friend's ex-husband set her up with a new boyfriend. They go on double dates. They go to parent-teacher conferences together. About to start the process myself. 19 years married. Together 21. Now that the kids are older. Self-sufficient. 2 of the 3 are driving. Don't need their hands held for every little thing. It will be a lot easier on them this year. It's all I can do to get 5 minutes of her attention in a day. She has her head down in her KickChat app from the moment she gets up and back home and goes to bed. She's been meeting guys, just friends I swear, from Kick for lunch, and getting a lot of massages with her therapist at weird hours of the evening. Of course she's cheating, although she swears she isn't. She turns her iPhone location services off most of the time she is out. 6 months ago she started getting her lashes done, brows, tans, goes to the gym, walks for exercise, massages 3 to 4 times a month. She gets pissed when I text her asking what she's doing, or when she will be home, or if she will be home for dinner. So, after all this time, it's clear she doesn't want time or anything else from me. So might as well let her go do her thing. We were together for 20 years. Married for 15. We started as high school sweethearts. But we eventually realized that we weren't the same people we were when we fell in love. We also realized that that wasn't going to change. We decided that the best way for everyone to be happy for the rest of our lives was to end it on peaceful terms before we were both 70 and resentful of each other for trapping each other in an unhappy marriage for 40+ years. Not me, but my grandmother once told me that she was considering divorcing her husband of over 50 years. The reason she gave me was, we stayed together for the kids. Now the kids are all grown up and have lives of their own. And now I can't ignore the small things about him. My grandpa. That annoyed me. She didn't go through with it, but she seemed sincere when she said it. It broke my heart, especially since I only ever saw the best side of him this year. Didn't get divorced, but started the process after about 25 years. Stuck it out for a few more years for the kids and ended up falling in love with her after the kids moved out. Relationships follow cycles. So glad I stuck it out. Obligatory. Not me. My parents. My dad filed for divorce after 25 years of marriage. My mom was shell-shocked. My dad was absolutely miserable, but the signs of a failed marriage were always present. My dad is very emotional and is quick to anger. He never really handled failure very effectively, and would be mad instead of constructive. My mom very family-oriented and was adamant that we never move farther than 40 miles from Chicago. Hell, when I was going away to college, she bawled to my dad to force me to go to a school closer to home. In a way, I think my dad resented my mom for never letting him travel or get away from Chicago. It also doesn't help that I'm fairly certain my mom became undiagnosed depressed once her mom died. All she would do was do her bare minimum at her job. A school bus driver. Come home and sleep. Finish her route for the day. cook a hamburger helper meal for the family, and then play Angry Birds on her iPad. It's really weird seeing your parents divorce in your 20s. You're adult enough to speak candidly, and neither of them likes what you have to say about them, during or after the fact. The silver lining out of it is my sisters and I know how not to behave in a relationship. My husband began surreptitiously going to strip clubs. He stole about $200 a week from various accounts in a business I own to fund these activities. He lost his job because he went there so often at lunch and would just stay. We had young kids, and so I stayed after he got some therapy. He was never honest with the therapist. About a year ago I learned he was doing it again. Plus texting strippers. My youngest kid graduates high school this year. I've done what's best for everyone else for 20 years now. This September was 21 years. I don't anticipate having a 22nd anniversary. It's really scary to think of being alone. I don't hate him, Monsieur. I feel sorry for Monsieur. I know he will feel very sad and lonely when I'm gone. But being near him feels like having my soul ripped from my body every day. I worked at a law firm that only practiced family law, divorces, child custody, wills and estates, etc. At one time we had like 8 clients getting divorced after 20+ years of marriage, and they were all high-ranking military men whose wives came out of the closet after all their kids had grown up and moved out of the house and the guys were getting ready to retire. I thought it was so weird. But I guess for whatever reason the women thought that their duties to their husbands and families were coming to an end and they wanted to live for themselves. I guess I know why they couldn't come out 30 years ago. It was a different time, but I was curious why they were all attracted to military guys. I assume maybe cause it meant their husbands would be away for years at a time during their service. Not myself, but my parents. They were married for 22 years when they separated. 24 years by the time the divorce was final. From the perspective of a child in the situation, there was no way that they were happy people together. There was hardly ever a quiet moment in the house because of my father's temper. But my mother knew how to serve it back too. However, the final straw was more of a chain of events. My father had a very rigid view of the family. Man works, woman stays home, cares for the home and children. When I was in high school, my father got injured at work and needed surgery. He worked a physically demanding job and would be out for 6 months. My mother, knowing that we were already falling behind on vehicle and house payments, decided to find part-time employment. She worked while the kids were in school. It was still important to her to see her kids get on the bus and be there when they got home. My father immediately believed that she was cheating on him. He installed a tracker and tape recorder in her car. He showed up at her workplace and caused a scene multiple times. He questioned her coworkers. He spent most of time at the house drinking. This was not an equal partnership, and it really never was. You should have seen how hurt he acted when my mom finally asked for a divorce. But he rebounded real quick. All he had to do was tell some woman on Plenty of Fish his sob story, and he moved right into her house. He spent a couple of years treating her and her children horribly before she kicked him out. Only took him a couple of weeks in a hotel to find another woman to let him move in. My parents got divorced after 22 years of marriage. They were never in love and didn't even like each other. They had me and then my sister a few years later and wanted to stay together for the kids. 12 years after I was born they had my brother, and that kept the cycle going. I wish I could say they are happy now, but they still like to cause trouble for each other. We're due with our first child soon and they're gonna have to figure out how to be grandparents together. Thankfully I'm 1,500 miles from them, so it won't be a headache often. Parents divorced after 25 years when my mom had what we thought at the time was a midlife crisis. She told my dad by draining $3,000 from the joint checking account to fund her divorce lawyer. 6 years later, they were officially divorced since she blew through that money on different lawyers that kept firing her as a client. We later ruled out midlife crisis when her behavior started to become more odd, erratic, and paranoid. She was in her early 50s when this behavior started. Now we, myself and my sister-in-law with psychology experience, think she has late-onset bipolar, and I say think since we can't get her officially diagnosed, since she believes nothing is wrong with her. She lives in NY and it is super hard to commit someone there unless they are a danger to themselves or other people. She's not dangerous, just can't hold down a job and lives in her car due to her own insubordinate, sporadic, paranoid behavior, but blames everyone else. No, she's not a narcissist, just mentally ill since she was never like this when we were growing up. She was very selfless and caring when she was younger. She cheated on me. Not much coming back from that. Shrugs. My parents split up after nearly 30 years. My dad was an asshole my entire life, so when they finally divorced when I was 18, there was no surprise. He'd been cheating for years and I think he was the one who finally asked for it. I think my mom stayed because she couldn't afford to start over. She spent her life putting my dad through school and wasn't educated herself. She had no family or anyone who could help her either. There was definitely some confidence issues on her part too. My parents were together for 25 years. Got divorced because my dad couldn't stop cheating. Remarried within 6 months of the divorce and loved his best life. Mom raised us. Fell in love a few years after the divorce, but he passed away 5 years later. She's doing well and is one of the most amazing people I have ever met. My parents got divorced because of my dad. We grew up in a military family. Dad was always deployed. My mom is a walking medical disaster. No offense to her. Raw at 23. Endometriosis at 24. Got a hysterectomy and everything. They married early, and had kids really early because of the endometriosis. My mom tried to cater to my dad, make sure he could still live his life in his 20s because they had kids earlier than expected. Well, being deployed all the time meant my dad could just fuck around with ladies off in other places. My mom stayed home and took care of us. Dad gets a divorce when he gets back. Gets remarried like 3 months later. That lasted like 2 years before she got her green card and ditched him. This year my mom still loves him despite him moving on to his 3rd marriage, having another kid, and never actually paying his portion of child support. So pretty much they got divorced so my dad could have a younger, more subservient wife.